And that presentation actually leads us perfectly into our next panel, which is going to be on policy and standardization. Joining us for the panel today will be David Murray, the Director of Solar Policy at the American Clean Power Association. And accompanying David will be some of our previous presenters, Leon Kraversky, Jane Rippingale, Matthew Casey, and Bernadette. So as you mentioned earlier, Bernadette, some of our other presenters focus more on O&M solutions, while your focus was mainly regarding policy. So I figured I'd begin this panel by asking a question regarding to the intersection of these topics. And so I would like the panel to maybe briefly describe what precedents currently exist for distributed solar O&M standards today. And the floor is to whoever would like to answer.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
I was just asking if you guys could maybe describe the current precedents that may exist in terms of distributed solar O&M standards.
Hey everyone, David Murray here. I think perhaps our puzzle look means that there aren't sufficient standards related to O&M, and this is really a critical opportunity for states and perhaps even federal actors to begin to enact them. As our previous speakers highlighted, there is really this gap, a knowledge gap as it relates to best practices with O&M. And so if we're really going to ensure that distributed solar can maximize output, then certainly ensuring that both industry and policymakers are aware of those. So, to first start out, I should also mention that these views are my own and not those of ACP, as I just started with ACP, but based on the conversation that we've had, I think there's an opportunity here to start to implement those.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. Yes, that was the point I was trying to get at. So thank you. I appreciate that. And so now that we've established that the standardization is lacking in distributed solar operations and maintenance, would someone like to describe maybe how advanced distributed solar O&M is necessary in achieving state clean energy goals and other targets?
I'm happy to take that as well. And for the audience's context, I'm really on this panel as my former role as Bernadette's counterpart in Maryland, Virginia, District of Columbia. And distributed solar is really integral to each of these states, in particular, the District of Columbia in central Maryland, as these fairly urbanized regions have a lot of load, and distributed solar is really critical to not only offsetting these load, but ensuring that we can maximize local clean energy generation, not only for the sake of moving away from fossil fuels, but also ensuring that we maximize clean energy output on buildings. And so with that in mind, distributed solar O&M is necessary for maximizing production. So in a state like the District of Columbia, we have a 10% solar carve out, meaning every little bit helps. And so as previous speakers have pointed out, if we're not responsibly maintaining our panels and existing systems, we can really fall short of that goal fairly easily. In fact, in Maryland, there is a significant underproduction, meaning what we think we're going to produce based on the megawatts on the ground and what we're actually producing is significantly different. And O&M has a impact on that. And so in order to achieve our renewable portfolio standards in each of these states, we're going to have to ensure that every megawatt of distributed solar we put on is truly maximized in terms of what it can put on the grid, and also how it's operating, and give utilities and suppliers visibility on when those systems are going to produce and how much they're producing, in order to make sure that the majority of the power that we produce in this region comes from resources like solar and wind.
And I would just like to add to that, in addition to the governmental capital that is required to get solar distributed, we have to build trust. We have to be able the people who want to spend money and deploy large amount of capital to be able to get these renewables out there faster, they have to be able to trust that the energy models and what we modeled we would be producing is actually what we're producing. So first we have to know that we can actually collect the data and know what that is, but we need to lower that gap so that we increase that trust basis that we have to get more capital out there for our distributed solar projects.
I would add, this is all obviously operations and maintenance of any infrastructure is incredibly important. It's a building block of this industry. So I would echo what both David and Jan have just said. I do think I want to inject, though, one kind of take a step back in a bigger picture that a lot of policymakers in California are grappling with. And that might, if they watch this presentation, might come away concerned about the reliability of a distributed solar. Obviously, O&M is equally important to the utility scale industry, and they face the same exact problems. But one thing I think is just really important to recognize is that there's operation and maintenance problems with any energy resource. And what we found in California as well as in Texas is that extreme climate events and extreme weather actually have take their toll on utility scale fossil fuel generation resources more so than solar. So the lack of moving parts, the general reliability of the sun, even under less than ideal situations, really does provide for some overall reliability. And the beauty, of course, of distributed generation is that if one system isn't cleaned very well or fails, it does not bring down the entire grid. So I just want to kind of take a step back and recognize that. That said, especially from a consumer point of view, and to Jan's point, we don't have anything if we don't have the trust of the consumer. So getting this information right, correcting our estimates to the consumer so they have realistic expectations, and then setting up good long-term O&M is critical to this industry. We're just getting started here, right? Even with 1.2 million distributed systems in California, we've got a lot more growth ahead of us and a lot to get right. And I would argue batteries enter a whole new area for the O&M industry that should be a top priority for us.
Definitely agreed. And then just in response to, I think, all three of the comments that you made, I know, David, you mentioned that we're going to be relying more on distributed solar as a resource as well. Bernadette, you mentioned it's more reliable. But in terms of what you said as well, Jan, is technology and just different practices going to have to adapt in order to accommodate this greater reliance on distributed solar PV?
Absolutely, and I think Bernadette answered that well when she mentioned storage. As we put more and more distributed energy resources on the grid, we're also placing energy storage, which not only enhances the value of distributed energy resources, but it provides a suite of other services to the grid that are going to be really fundamental to moving towards a clean energy future. Bernadette also mentioned in California, there was an attempt by the local utilities to implement demand charges on solar customers, particularly larger ones. And with O&M technology and better visibility on when these systems will be producing and how much they will be producing, we can effectively avoid the need to put any of these charges on these customers or these systems. And so in order to have greater visibility and build trust not only with the consumer, but also the utility, we're seeing a really great opportunity with technology to provide better data to all the stakeholders in the grid and really ensure that we can maximize the value from solar systems, both on rooftops, and community solar arrays, which are a little bit larger. I also want to mention too, storage helps us avoid curtailment. You see in the District of Columbia a need for some systems to be curtailed, given we've been successful at putting a number of systems on that we actually can generate more than we need at certain times of day. And if we couple those systems with energy storage, we can actually not only storage and store that power, but also ensure that it can provide power into the evening. And so these types of technologies are ensuring that we're really getting more and more value out of distributed energy resources. What we've seen in the last decade is just the floor. And I think that the not only will storage help us enhance this value, but it'll also offset the need for expensive communications infrastructure and grid infrastructure like telemetry. And so here in DC, we're looking at ways that technology like better O&M technology can offset the need for grid infrastructure and other costly investments that don't need to happen because of our existing portfolio of distributed energy resources technology.
One of the super fun, so that is absolutely all correct, David. And one of the super fun things to think about as we improve this and we harmonize our data and we're actually able to work together collectively with our resources, then energy can actually become a commodity that we could trade. Just like Airbnb made your house an asset for you, even when you're not at home, the same way we can have solar systems that you can leave and the solar systems can generate energy and you can sell that as a product just because you live in a place that's got, a lot of sunlight. So there are a tremendous number of opportunities that by having the data digitized in a way that we can exchange it consistently and reliably, we can optimize our collective resources together to make sure no one's hurt, and we've got hospitals and all these things as we go into disaster resilience versus disaster recovery. But we can also turn what are a whole variety of consumer assets into something that we can open up whole new markets and whole new products for all of us collectively, and change the model that we have for energy so that it's something that is abundant rather than needing to be managed with a scarcity and a highly regulated perspective.
That's definitely, you have some great points there, Jan. Thank you so much. We are running about 20 minutes late, so I'm going to pose one last question before I open the floor up to the Q&A session. But are there any other standardization initiatives that we should maybe be aware of now that can help with just the standardization of operation and maintenance across the industry of distributed solar photovoltaics?
I'll take that one. So we are familiar with quite several attempts of doing so, but what we mainly see is it's being applied in the utility scale. We don't see it so much being applied on distributed, and that's a major point. So we don't have so much data standards across the industry, and this has already been spoken about. We don't have standards and best practices which are unified across the sectors, the countries, even in the developed world. So we are in a situation where technically every company can offer its own O&M program and decide whatever it does. And essentially the customer doesn't have sufficient tools to understand what he receives. And this leads to mistrust in the industry. So I think the first step is to bring this trust, to understand what O&M means, and that a residential or commercial owner would receive an O&M service, an O&M package. This would be something which he understands, is standing up to a standard, and this has to do with authorities, and of course associations can play a role in this as well. Overall, we've seen quite a lot of work being done on this, but unfortunately, most of this is not being implemented.
This is Bernadette. I'll just jump in and say there's always room for improvement, of course, and I think this is an important area and important discussion. So I really appreciate being invited to this. That said, we've built something pretty amazing. Just in California alone, I've already mentioned the 1.2 million systems totaling 11 gigawatts, and we're adding about 60,000 batteries a year, hoping to bump that up significantly over the coming years. All of these systems, the majority of them are working. We have very happy customers. So I agree, we need to get better and all of the things that have been said, but I think we also need to take stock in what our accomplishments. The other thing I would argue or just point out is that we do a significant amount of standardization in the pre-manufacturing side through codes and standards. About 20% of CALSA's work is focused on codes and standards and making sure that we are building that house of steel before anything is ever even sold to the customer and installed. And so that's just a really big part, I would argue, of the umbrella topic of operations and maintenance and standardization that we need to do a better job, frankly, as an industry of investing in. And I just encourage our member companies and others to really put some more time and energy and money into the codes and standards work.
I just have one final thought about the O&M. Since the cost of customer acquisition is so high for solar installers, the O&M package and O&M product suite and these standards open up this opportunity to really differentiate yourself as a solar installer and then establish this long-term relationship so that your cost of customer acquisition can actually be reduced. So this is an area of opportunity for the entire industry to play better and reduce general soft costs for the entire customer base. So it is actually a very exciting and area of innovation as we look at the industry as a whole.
Well, wonderful. Thank you all so much to all of our speakers for taking the time to share both your presentations and your knowledge and commentary with us during the panel. We've covered quite a bit of information at this point, so I'd like to open the floor to anyone with questions for a Q&A session. We are running a little late, but so if anyone has to leave, that's not a problem, but the rest of us. No? Okay, well, if there are no questions, I would just like to thank everyone once again for taking the time to join us this evening or morning, depending on where you are. We will be posting a copy of the recording of this event online, and we will be distributing it in an email to all registered participants in case you'd like to watch it again or distribute it. Perfect. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much
for this evening.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was super fun.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Andrea and Isaac, thank you very much.
Thank you, Igor.
Thank you, Andrea and Isaac. Well done, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.